Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, this is an exciting episode, I will say. We have somebody on here that comes from a company that I think we've all heard of, we're all familiar with. I'm going to be joined by Dave Glick, and he is the Senior Vice President of Enterprise Business Services for Walmart, which I'm sure you've heard of, definitely. And we're going to dive into a little bit about what does that title actually mean? What does Dave do for Walmart? And he is focused a lot on a specific project around AI adoption in the corporate environment in Walmart, which I think is top of mind for many people in their businesses. So we're going to hear how one of the largest businesses out there goes about this and how they navigate some of the change management aspects of that and some of the projects too that may be tied directly into their fulfillment and distribution operations as well. So Dave, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. I'm super excited to be here.
Absolutely. Excited to have you on here. I think we'll be able to learn a lot from you today and very interested to hear how you all are approaching some of these things. So I don't think I need to ask you, one of my normal questions is give us a brief overview of your company for people who haven't heard of it. I don't think I need to ask that one on this episode, but maybe tell us a little bit about your role and kind of what you get involved with in Walmart's kind of operations.
Yeah, so I lead Enterprise Business Services. And what does that mean?
Yes.
It's finance technology and operations, people technology and operations, corporate functions like governance, customer care, and IT. In addition to that, my main customer is associates. And so I'm in charge with putting AI in the hands of every corporate associate every day.
Everyone. Okay.
Everyone. And, you know, we started this journey, I guess it was 3 years ago, where was the Chat GPT moment in November of 2022. And, you know, at Walmart, we said we have to be on the forefront of AI. In the first 2 years, we spent trying to figure out what that meant. And, you know, the LLMs had hallucinations and biases, and we were worried about, you know, what could go wrong. And about a year ago, you know, Agentic AI came about. And we said, we got to go big into Agentic AI. And so I started out by having my most senior engineers start using it, do something. Like it didn't even matter what they did. I just wanted them to do something, build an agent. And, you know, they came back and said, wow, this is amazing. And I think one of them said, you know, this technology isn't overhyped. This is underhyped. And, you know, one of our engineers started vibe coding, and he came to one of the managers and showed him. And the managers came to me and said, this is underhyped. I've got a case of Diet Coke and nothing to do this weekend, so I'm going to vibe code all the weekend.
That sounds like a party to me, yeah.
Yeah, and so this sort of kicked off trying to understand what are the limits of AI and like how can we adopt it faster and you know how we can push faster and more aggressively into it because it's very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think obviously, you know, as you mentioned, the last 3 years, it's just been overwhelming how AI has just progressed so rapidly and become I guess so accessible would be the right word, right, to so many people. And like as you said, you told your engineers like just do something, right, just get started. And I think one of the interesting things about AI as a technology, right, is it's very easy to just get started and do something now with some of these things that have been come into the market and things of that nature. So you said your job is to get AI in the hands of all associates, right? So what does that really kind of entail and how do you view it from like the business perspective of Walmart? And does that mean, you know, every associate at some point should be utilizing AI every single day or what is kind of the entire scope of that? That's pretty broad, right?
It is very broad and you know, we've been trying to operationalize it for the last few years. But here's where I've come to. You know, we started out with our engineers. We're building agents and discovering what the tool could do. And, you know, when we thought about a year ago, every associate using AI every day, we thought, oh, that's going to whatever your favorite LLM is and asking it for research or asking it questions and sort of a chatbot. But about, you know, I don't know, a third of the way through this year, one of our engineers built his own coding agent. And, you know, I like to say that when you put customers and engineers close together, good things will happen.
Yeah.
And so what if you could make the customer into the engineer? And one night we got together and I went to the engineers and said, "What are you guys doing tonight?"
Yeah.
They're like, "Oh, we're going to dinner." I'm like, "How about we vibe code instead?" And so I sat with them from like 7 p.m. till midnight, and we built a pretty cool tool. And but in addition to the engineers using the coding agent to build these things, we had a couple operators in our finance services team. They were like, "We want to do this too." And so what we found is with these coding agents that our non-engineers, we're calling them citizen builders or citizen engineers.
Okay.
They can build things for themselves. And this is super exciting because while we want our big scalable things, sort of enterprise-wide software to be built by engineers, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but every year we get together, we say, all the users come and say, we want the engineering team to do this or this, and then we see what's above the line or below the line. And that's very frustrating for the users because they have to wait for the engineer to come and tell them what they can do and what they can't do. Now they can do a lot of these things for themselves, like building dashboards or data analytics or validating data. And so this has given our business users agency. And I didn't think that this would catch on with the business users, but it's caught on like wildfire.
Really?
And we've trained many thousands of folks, and we've got about 50% of them are daily active users now.
Oh, wow.
So think about that. People who've never coded before in their lives, we've put this tool in their hand, and now they're able to fish for themselves. And about half of them that we've trained are using it on a regular basis, which I think is amazing.
Interesting. I mean, that's incredibly interesting because I think that it is so amazing, like the capabilities of just the person that hasn't necessarily had like training on building apps or things like that or coding, that now they can expand those possibilities. And like you said, I mean, I've in my career in the past, I've dealt with that frustration that like, hey, I want this dashboard for my operation, and well, yeah, it's going to take like a couple weeks for us to get together. I'm like, well, we want to look at it like now, right? So like, how do we make that possible? And I think that's really incredible to hear. And so how has, I guess, let me take a step back here because I'm curious, right? You're leading this kind of effort, right? To put AI in there. So how do you personally, I guess, when you first got assigned this task or this project, right? How did you kind of educate yourself and do discovery work around like what is actually happening with AI and what is potentially possible here?
Yeah, that's interesting. I started out, I was listening to podcasts. One of the ones I listen to is the All In podcast, and read a bunch of stuff on Twitter to see what folks are doing. But then, really what we've learned is you only learn by doing. And so, I do a little on the side, but I sit with my engineers and watch them do these things. And then they report back to me, either I'm watching them or, every Monday morning someone will come in and said, I tried this thing over the weekend. You got to see this. Yeah. Or, I dumped all this data into the vector DB and I was able to query it in these different ways. And what we found is this is a great opportunity for bottoms up leadership. Is that, it's my job, and I think the job of all the officers and the VPs to enable our engineers to innovate. And, it's hard because we like to be prescriptive and say, engineers, we want you working on the highest priority projects. And, we need to prioritize these, and it's very important. But, this is one of those places where we don't know what the future holds, and we don't even know what the present holds. So unleashing our engineers, unshackling our engineers to go innovate and try things has led to great results.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so interesting to see too, like, cause I know like myself, like I'm deep into it, like, and exploring all the stuff that I can do with Gemini and, sometimes I joke that like, I think Gemini like tucks me in at night cause we'll have these like long conversations, like these thoughts that, just brew in your head. And I'm like, oh no, I can actually like flesh these out now with Gemini, right? It's not just me going through some of these brainstorming sessions, but, I love that you said there, you kind of unshackle them a little bit and it allows for this innovation and creative juices to kind of flow. And it's exciting. Like you said, one of your engineers like, hey, I got, a 6-pack of Diet Coke and I'm vibe coding, right? Like I'm good to go, right? I think it opens the door to so many possibilities. So I'm curious, like, as you go about this, right? Because, bringing AI into the daily workflow and for associates and things like that, obviously, like from an engineer's perspective, super exciting, right? To get that. But for some, could be quite different than how they have normally gone about their everyday work and approach this. So I'm curious, how do you handle some of the change management aspect, especially on this kind of large scale that Walmart has?
Yeah, and my views have evolved in the last couple of years. 18 months ago, I went and gave a presentation, and I was standing in the green room while the previous folks were talking, and they were saying, change management's the hardest part. And my initial response was, well, hey, wait a minute, we're engineering. Engineering's the hardest part. And over the last few years, I realized engineering is getting easier and easier. And actually driving change across an organization, especially an organization this large, is a big challenge. And so the tack that we've taken is by bringing everybody along with us. And, it's much easier for people to get excited about AI. So we say, you can build stuff too. Would you like to build an agent? Would you like to build something that simplifies your job? What is the thing that you wished you had for the last 10 years, but it was always below the line for engineers? And so the business teams, the users have really responded to this. And one of the funnest things I have happen is I'll be walking down the hall, and someone I've never met walks up to me and says, "Dave, you got to see this. I built an agent." And for this example, it was like I took a Harry Potter picture off of the internet and said, like, do a visual search on Walmart and find the 10 things that look closest to this picture. And several big companies have been trying to do visual search for decades. And they've had, hundreds of engineers working on this. And now we have someone who never written code before was able to do this in a few hours. And so every time, both for engineers and non-engineers, every time we allow them to spend time innovating, they come back and they can't believe what they were able to build. And this goes from, the first line person who's just trying to build an agent to validate some spreadsheets against each other, to our engineers who have 25 years in the industry, and they're like, holy smokes, I never thought it would be able to do this, and it could. And so the joy of discovery is back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, that joy of discovery and like feeding the curiosity too, right? Like you mentioned, some people are like, oh, well, I've been thinking about this thing for like 5 years that I've wanted to solve for, and now it becomes even like easier to do that and figure that out. Like I know myself personally, like I did a little vibe code of a little like flight app that I wanted to do, like, and it took me like 45 minutes to do it. I'm like, I've been thinking about this thing for like 5 years, right? And I just did it like 45 minutes. It's pretty wild what's possible there. So I'm curious.
Can I call out one other thing?
Sure, go ahead.
As you think about it, you're saying you wanted this thing for years. And, one of the things we found in traditional software development, especially waterfall, is like, the user knows what they want. And then they tell the center of excellence, who tells the product management team, who tells the engineering team, and then we end up building the wrong thing. 100% likelihood.
The game of telephone, right?
Yeah, and this may take months and months and months. But if we can turn that iteration cycle of, hey, let me just show you what I want. Picture is worth 1,000 words. So if the user can rapidly build a prototype that has the data elements they want, the UI they want, they can hand us off to that, and we can build it into a scalable project. But it short circuits months and months of confusion and miscommunication with the telephone game. And so that's going to be a simplifier for all of us in deciding what we're going to build.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting because I think that happens in many facets of business, right? It's like somebody has an idea, whether it's something that's going to result in a app or something digitally, or just a business idea in a sense. And as it gets passed along, right, it ends up changing, and then this work gets put into it, and the person that had the original idea is like, that's not quite what I was thinking, but I guess we're here now, right? And it's kind of like, how do you avoid that a little bit? And I think you can develop your idea a little more, do some proving out on your own, and then pass that to be like polished, right? And I think that's really a huge value add and a win from what we see from AI as a value added tool there. So I'm curious, because it sounds like you have certainly fostered this environment for innovation and essentially playing around with the AI, right? To get comfortable with it and get some adaptability and just see the possibilities, right? But there are many companies out there that are still, figuring out how to get started with AI and how to do these types of things. I mean, what is your advice for those leaders on how they can create that environment and foster that environment to try and, I guess, reduce some of the potential resistance employees may have to this type of change?
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky to work at Walmart, where our CEO, both our outgoing and incoming CEO, are totally dialed in on AI, and they talk about it with their directs when they have staff meeting or performance reviews. They want to talk about AI. And I had a boss many years ago who, our focus was going to be on recruiting. And she said, look, I need to get every single person in my organization focused on staffing up this team. And so anytime that you have an interview or something having to do with hiring, you can miss any other meeting. You can miss my staff meeting, you miss one-on-ones. And when we go to a staff meeting, our success stories we would share were all about recruiting. And so my point of view is, in order to turn a ship like this or get everybody engaged, you have to be banging that drum sort of continuously and tell people it's okay to experiment. If you need to be late to my staff meeting, or you need to skip my staff meeting because you're vibe coding, have at it. And so I think this repetition is important, and giving people permission. And then the final thing, or I don't know if it's the final thing, maybe it's the first thing, is, I've got a friend at another company who said, I can't even get ChatGPT through our security protocol. And so I think we need to make every effort as technology leaders and business leaders that we need to drive these things through. And obviously, and don't get me wrong, obviously compliance is paramount.
Sure.
Security paramount. InfoSec is paramount. But we have data privacy policies. We have data governance policies. So let us go drive these things through that and make sure that we're sitting with our friends in legal and compliance and iterating quickly on what we need to do to both be secure and both be available. And I think that was one of the big things that I spent probably a week where I'd get up in the morning and we'd go through a bunch of things, a bunch of questions that the legal team had, and then it would be fixed by the end of the day. And the next morning there were more questions. And we spent several days in a row, full time, marching through all those, and it's sort of the confluence of the engineers, the InfoSec team, the compliance team, the legal team. But yes, we all need to be compliant. Yes, we need to be secure, and we need to march forward. And if we don't march forward, we're going to be left behind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great line there. If we don't march forward, you will be left behind, right? And I've heard that several times when it comes to AI, like if, you're, whether it's a small business, large business, medium-sized business, right? If you're not kind of embracing that and learning how to leverage that for your business, there's a competitor that is, and they're probably already much further ahead of you because of that, right? So very interesting there. And I'm curious, you talked about some of those, we'll call them maybe kind of red tape hurdles a little bit, right? Making sure like the security is there, and then the legal too as well. I mean, going through that and essentially, climbing that mountain initially, I imagine, right? What would you say are like the benefits once you get through all of that, and now like you're able to expose all this? I mean, how is Walmart really seeing like the rewards from this project?
Yeah, I mean, I like to talk about a marathon. When I used to run marathons, and now I run half marathons, it's like the most important thing is getting to the starting line.
Sure.
And this effort that I was just talking about is getting to the starting line. Like, we know we have amazing associates, we have smart associates. So if you put something in front of them and give them some startup tips, or maybe not even give them startup tips, they'll be off and running. And so it's our job to move those blockers, and again, continuing to be safe and secure, but move those blockers out of their way. And can you imagine sitting here in January of 2026 and not being able to use ChatGPT or Gemini or any of the other models because we couldn't get it through our processes?
Point.
Yeah. We think I think it's unfathomable, but I've got friends who are at their companies and they haven't made it through there. So, we have to remember, we're always divinely discontent and, oh my God, we're behind. Are we moving fast enough? But we have to remember that we're doing amazing things already.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great way to put it for sure. And, it's fascinating to hear how you're going about this and just the discovery and innovation there. And I'm curious, like, obviously there's been some discourse, right, over, AI and how does it impact the human worker and things like that. I mean, how does Walmart, I guess, view that, and how do you approach some of that potential like resistance a little bit?
We don't know what the future holds.
Mm-hmm.
And, Doug has in the past said, we expect all jobs to change in some way, shape, or form, but we don't know what that looks like. My feeling is the best thing I can do is to put these AI tools in the hand of my users, help them with training, help them with upskilling. And I believe that ends up accreting to Walmart over the long term.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that upskilling is certainly like such an important part of that, right? Like getting people to understand how to use the tools, like you said, and being able to be comfortable with them, because I think they are incredibly powerful.
For sure.
We've talked about here today, for sure. And now what about in terms of like, this is the new warehouse podcast, right? So we got to talk a little bit about the ops side.
Yeah.
Like, how are you seeing, some of this come through to like the supply chain side of Walmart?
Yeah, it's funny because I've worked off and on in operations for the last 25 years.
I saw that. Yeah.
And we spend a lot of time talking about outbound. A lot of time talking about how do we get packages out quickly, get it to the user quickly. But the fun part is in the inbound. And I'm sure that the inbound dock can be messy. And our ordering process is we send a PO, the vendor sends inventory, then they send an invoice. And if the PO, the inventory, and the invoice don't match, that rolls downstream, downhill. And guess who sits at the bottom of the hill? Mm-hmm. My team does.
Yeah.
So we manage the claims and dispute processes. And I'm sure you're intimately familiar with, when the invoice and the PO and the inventory don't match, that ends up sidelining inventory, which is a pain
That's a delay. Yeah.
Yeah, pain for your users. Or your dock clerk, your inbound receivers, all those things. Actually, once went to a tour to a fulfillment center, and my boss walked in and said, "Where's the piles?" at the inbound dock. And
I've been there. Yeah.
The manager said, "We don't have any piles here." And then he walked up to an associate, and he said, "Where are the piles?" He's like, "Oh, we knew you were coming, so we shrink wrapped the pallets and put them up in the rack so you wouldn't be able to find them." But of course, we found them. Mm-hmm. But my point being, there's a lot of operational problems, both for the warehouse and for the finance team and for the vendor. The beginning with these mismatches at the inbound dock. And so what my team is doing is trying to look at all the claims we make, which are the sort of the mechanisms, all the claims we make, all the claims that are disputed, and whether we win or lose, have to pay back those claims or disputes. And what we found is a lot of the root causes happen on the inbound dock. It's a very complex process. We've got a whole decision tree and a logic. But, imagine that if we put on the PO, we want six units of this thing. And the vendor sends us 3 cases of 2 units and puts that on the invoice. That's a claim. Mm-hmm. And that seems like something that we should be able to figure out as we dig into this logic. And some of this logic is decades old. This is on a mainframe. And so the idea of auditing it and understanding, using, disputed claims and lost disputes as a proxy for false claims is one of the things we're doing. And we're both cleaning that up in the data, in the systems, but we also want to go to the inbound dock and make sure we're making lives easier for our associates. So they don't have to spend their time like assigning a piece of inventory to a PO. Like the system should do that. Or, if they have to sideline something, we should try to automate the decision process there so they don't have to wait weeks or months for a merchant to go into the system and tell them what to do about it.
Yeah, very, very interesting there. And I think that you have such a great point there in the beginning about, for so long there was so much talk about, how to apply technology and how to automate things on the outbound side, right? But when we think about the operation, and as a whole, right? I mean, everything really starts at inbound, right? I mean, I spent a lot of my career focused on inventory control specifically, right? And
Yeah.
a lot of inventory issues happen as soon as it hits the dock door. If it's not right there, then that oftentimes carries through many of the processes throughout the facility. But I think it's really interesting to hear how you're approaching that. And I got to say, you you talking about the dock being a little messy or the piles, giving me flashbacks for sure. We had somebody, we had a boss at one place I worked at would come in and say, where are the bad bananas? Show me the bad bananas, right? And so, I think addressing that and looking at those types of things, obviously you guys, I'm sure, have a very high volume that's coming inbound, right? So how do you process that faster? How do you identify these things that you talked about, and how do you ultimately reduce the delays, right? Because every time this happens and you have to put something to the side, well, that inventory is not really available for you to sell or fulfill and make that happen. So very interesting there. And I'm curious, I mean, you're doing that through like an agentic AI approach, or what are you utilizing there?
It's a combination.
Sure.
Some of it's sort of decision tree logic.
Okay.
A bunch of if-then statements. That's probably oversimplifying it, but broadly, we're walking through an old logic. But one of the things AI is great at is pattern matching, and so you or I can look at one or two or three or four variables and say, oh, when this thing happens and this thing happens and this other thing happens at the same time, the root cause is X. But if only two of those things happen, the root cause is probably Y. But with AI, we can look at like hundreds of variables, if not thousands of variables.
Sure.
And so it allows us, rather than doing sort of one-time audits, to do sort of 100% deep audit across the whole set of data. And I think that's where we're going to take some of the things that we could do manually and automate them, but also some of the things we're never able to do because we couldn't grok that many variables in our heads.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting to see, because you think about, and as we talked about earlier, like the possibilities that open up with AI, right? Because if we think about just us as a human just trying to check all these different things and all these variables that you're talking about, it's like we have a limit, right? There's only so much we can process. And especially, if we talk about an inbound operation where they're trying to make these decisions many times in one single day, right? There's also some decision fatigue a little bit that starts to occur, and some of these variables maybe are potentially missed. So AI certainly helps to process more of that and get deeper visibility, and I think understanding around that, especially around those patterns that you talked about as well. So really interesting to hear how you're approaching that on the inbound side. Now, as you mentioned in your career, you've had some time on the ops side as well, and a lot of that focus has been on the technology front too, as I saw in some of your background there. So I'm curious, as you look at kind of the landscape right now, I imagine you're still very much in tune with all the tech that's happening out there. I mean, what kind of has your attention, or what do you think are technologies that are really getting some good traction and we'll see a lot of implementation into operations world?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we can't have a sentence without AI in it.
No,
so the technology that's getting lots of traction is AI. It's interesting because I've done several of these podcasts, and we think about what do you expect 3 years to look like, 3 years from now to look like, and I'm like, I don't even know what 3 weeks from now are going to look like. Just think about, again, a year ago we'd never heard of agents, we'd never heard of MCP, and now supposedly this is the industry standard. And every time you turn around, you wake up Monday morning and read Twitter, and one of the hyperscalers has released a new model which is better than the other ones, or someone it's got video, or it's got audio or images and movies, and like every day there's something new. And so while we want to it's paramount to build things for the business and build things that solve real business problems, we also want to make sure that we're on the front edge and we're investigating and we're staying on top of all the new functionalities that's coming along. Because I feel like if we get off the sort of the peak of that wave, we're going to fall behind.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is, such a great point. It's, it's hard to say what does 3 years from now look like, because as you mentioned, I mean, the rapid iteration and evolution of some of these tools is just, I mean, it's just incredible, right? I mean, I think, if I think in my lifetime, at least, like I can't think of any other technology that I've seen like evolve so quickly, right? And just expand like the capabilities so much, which is pretty amazing, right? But it also kind of like, wow, like if we can do this in, just a couple weeks, right? Like to your point, like 3 years, like what can we do in 3 years? It's going to be pretty wild out there. So very interesting there. And I'm curious, do you have any thoughts around like, because we're talking about, agentic here and LLMs and things like that. What about from like a physical AI perspective? Do you have any thoughts there?
You know, I'm a proud Tesla driver, and my car drives me from here to there. So that's the physical AI that I watch. I haven't been deeply involved in that yet. We've been focused on moving bits, not atoms, so far.
Mhm. Gotcha. Okay. All right. Very good to know. And so, we look at AI as a whole, as I mentioned in the beginning, right? I think many companies are looking at AI, trying AI, experimenting AI, trying to figure out how to apply it to their business. Many still trying to figure out how to get started in some way. So as we close out the conversation here, I'm curious, what would be, from your learnings is going down this project and this journey with Walmart, what would be kind of your one piece of advice for people who are looking to also implement this and get this in the hands of their employees?
Yeah, clearly it's like just do it. You got to put this in the hands of employees, and our employees are super creative, super bright, and they will do things we never even thought of if we can get into their hands. And so the tack that I've been taking is um, how do we move roadblocks out of the way so that people can innovate? And rather than having a team of, X thousand engineers innovating and building things, how do we have a team of 10x business users who are building and innovating as well?
Gotcha. So tear down the roadblocks and let people play around, basically, I think is my big takeaways from here is allow them to kind of play in the sandbox and allow them to foster those ideas, get creative and get innovative with some of the tools that are out there. So really great advice from you, Dave, and really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your insights, and super insightful to hear how a company like Walmart is approaching AI and how they're enabling their employees to be able to leverage it, and some of the possibilities that you've kind of uncovered, and some of the possibilities that the employees have discovered as they kind of feed that natural curiosity around projects and things that they've been thinking about maybe for quite some time, and is now actually possible for them to do. So really appreciate you sharing with us here. If people are interested in connecting with you, talking with you more about this topic, what's the best way to do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm a pretty active poster, and you can find, I think, Dave Glick or David Glick. And if you're at a big vendor of Walmart, it's a big CPG company, and you want to dig in with us on claims and disputes, please ping me there, and we're happy to reach out and work on that together with you.
All right, fantastic. And we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com, as well as in these show notes here, so you can connect with Dave, and really appreciate you coming on the show. And thank you once again for your time today.
Thank you. I'm happy to have been here.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video here on our YouTube channel, The New Warehouse Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and if you like this video in particular, make sure you like it as well. And if you want to get this great t-shirt that you see in the video behind me, Warehouses Are Sexy, head to warehousesAreSexy.com and get your own.